Welcome back to the third devlog of the game Sand. So, initially what I started working on this day was saving. So the saving still had some issues, like I got it over well done, but I started putting in some print statements, seeing what was taking the most time, and I found a major bug where I was creating a gigantic string and kept on concatenating onto it, and then I would push that to the file. I figured out that, hey, if I write individual lines, each one of those sections, I won't have a gigantic string I have to concatenate, which is a lot faster. And then, so this is just kind of showing the speed improvement. If you look closely down at the text there, you can kind of see that it immediately saves. There's like a few frame buffers, but it's not laggy at all. And then this episode I started working on the biome system. So originally when I have the biomes, they're in terrain and it loads the entire world all at once using Perlin noise. Now I'm switching to open simplex noise instead because it is faster and I don't have to render this huge array system. So now that I have that, I just kind of made the class files for it, and I'm still editing the biomes as we speak. And then when I was looking over the terrain code and when generating the biomes in the forest, I saw that it requires an ID number, and I kind of want to change that so eventually it's going to be an enumerated list. So I can like say, oh, I want sandObject.sand instead of whatever, just so it's a little bit faster and less things to remember when editing biomes. And then here's just a quick look at the code. It's a fairly simple system, it's fairly object orientated. And then editing the biomes here is, I have if it's below the water level, generate the water, which I'm going to have a function for that eventually, and then generate the terrain piece, which is just to its height, and then here is a updated after I finish both the desert and the forest biome. I do have a random integer here. I will apply that to the seed eventually. This is just for a test. Okay, so I just finished up all the biome code, so I commented out the original stuff and then replaced it with that smaller section so it's less for that object to do. So let's launch the game here. Okay, so the entire world is empty, and I think it's because I completely forgot to even call the functions, which is really frequent, because you can see in the code there, I'm only printing out what biome it generated, so I just got to add in the code of what I need to add. Now that we have the code in here, you can see all those thread exception errors. The biomes are working. I do need to raise the height levels and then add all 4 of the biomes. And I also need to fix a bug where it tries to fall below the map, because that's where all the thread exceptions are coming from. So I'll fix that here too. Okay, I made the terrain heights a lot more extreme, which, like, now I know what's the issue because I'm multiplying by 0, but don't these peaks look amazing? Like, just look at that. This is a good extreme hills biome. Maybe I should actually add this to the game. But, yeah. So now I'm multiplying the data by itself on the height map, which the hills are more smooth, there's less errors, but there's still some issues. I think it's because it's still multiplying by 0, so I'm going to put a padding variable in there, so it has to be like greater than 5. Okay, now I just added the padding variable, and let's test it out here, and let it load, and then the entire world is stone. The reason is because when you multiply 5 times 20, that's greater than the actual height of the map. Now I've set the world to a smaller value, so now it's 0.01. So now the world has a base all the way through the entire generation. Now I just need to make it so it's more smooth. Okay, now that the biome system is completely optimized and the biomes are correct, look how fast the game loads now. It's almost instantaneous. There's only that split second of load screen. I was going to do a side-by-side comparison, but I deleted my old clips, and I don't have the code to do it. So now to take advantage of the faster loading times, I made the worlds 4 times bigger, which is going to make the save files gigantic, but it takes so long. You can see that, like, I just do the side-scrolling thing where it's a little glitch in the game where it remembers the last position of your mouse, so if you take your mouse off it and you can move the window, you can still have the game running. But yeah, the worlds are 4 times as big. It still runs really nice. It loads faster than it did originally, so I think this is a step in the right direction. I think now what I'm going to do is, instead of having it stored in a static array, I'm going to put it in an array list so the worlds can be infinitely generated, and then every time it can't call the next chunk, it's going to generate the new chunk. I don't know if there's going to be huge performance issues since it loads the 4 chunks super fast in the original. I'm assuming it's going to do the same for the 20 or infinite. The array list biome generation is going to have to wait a little bit, but I did add 2 more biomes. There's a plains biome and a red desert biome. The plains biome is kind of in the wrong area. It's in a damp, cold climate, which I want to add that in a different spot, but I only have 4 biome generations currently. On the more extreme sides, the temperate ones are still limited. And I also added the red desert, which is in the correct spot of a hot environment, so yeah. While I was exploring the code to make the infinitely generated worlds, I saw that my terrain was poorly optimized, so I figured out how to make better threads, call all of the threads, instead of, I was making a new thread, running the thread, going back, running the next thread. So I fixed that, so now all the threads run simultaneously, and I made it so it would update 100 times, just for fun, to see if it can handle it. It can, so that means I am now limited to how fast I can draw the game, which I have a few ideas of how I'm going to make that faster too. I want this game to run as fast as possible. So you can kind of see that I'm placing everything. It's almost too fast running even at 10 times speed. I slowed it down here. So I will slow this down again, but it's nice to know that there's still a lot of optimization I can pull out of it. The next step I took to optimize the rendering, because that's where the bulk of the work happens, is I split it into 3 threads and then just divided all the work up on the sides of the list. I know, so if I were to only render 1/3 of it, it would change depending on how many pieces of sand are on screen of what the third was. But here I'm running the game in 1080p, 60 FPS. I had to speed up the sand updates because the difference between 720 and 1080 is like 1.5. So I actually sped it up to 3 times normal speed, and it seems to be about right because you do drop FPS. So I do need to make a function that detects what your frame rate is compared to the global rate. Like how in Unity you can, I'm forgetting what equation it is, but there's some function you can call that normalizes speeds. So that's just what works for me. Here's my finalized speed of what I chose at that 3 times for 1080p. I still need to make that function that detects what your FPS is. Like, it does display, so I do have that function. I just need to normalize it to 60 FPS and how many times it should render per frame. So I ended up adding that FPS normalization, so I have it run every 500 times per second, but there's an issue here. So if I'm running at a higher FPS than 500, the game doesn't know what to do. It just completely skips the update, so it doesn't render the new update. So I go back here, set it to 1000, so now I can go up to 1000 FPS, but that's not future-proofed. So I'm going to default it to it happens at least once per frame. So like it works here, and then I scroll up to the sky and then it crashes, so I'll fix that here. Okay, I put in that at least one update per frame. So if you are running a super fast computer, you can kind of cheat, but since it's a sandbox game, I'm not super worried. It just helps out people who have worse computers. And then at a test to see how normalized the speeds are, I went to 4K. I had a few issues because my computer's just not good enough to run this game at 4K anyways. And then you can kind of see it cuts out a few times, and then my recording software, since it's so big, it doesn't compress it down to my screen, and I don't have hold mouse, or my mouse position isn't held to the game itself, it's held to my computer. So I clicked off and then moved my OBS, so it kind of broke it. Recap of what I did. I'm still working on the biomes, but I did add that better system so I can just easily add more things. Here I'm just kind of showing off the different color palettes I added from last video, so things are kind of working out better. Since I optimized the game, I can comfortably run it in 1080p, and then things fall as they should. They fall at a nice normal speed, and I can actually travel the world pretty decently. So if you guys like the video, please feel free to subscribe, like the video, comment, check out my other videos. I think one's going to pop up here of the most suggested. I only have 3 videos on the channel right now, but if there is any in the future, hopefully I'll have a lot more, because I'm having a lot of fun with this sand game project. So hit the socials, I guess. Bye.